Hey, it's me, the Soy Pill. And gosh golly gee, things aren't going so well. Doge gutted US aid, leaving millions to rot while we cede our soft power to Russia and China. We're cutting off millions from healthcare. The Trump admin is ignoring judges and subverting congressional power, eroding the checks and balances of our democracy, and we've started a new war on an improper noun.
We're not at war with Iran, we're at war with Iran's nuclear program.
And even if Trump doesn't violate the 22nd Amendment and run for a third term, as he suggested he might, there's still over 1,200 days left in this administration. Now, despite what J.D. Vance says,
the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives.
These strikes were a spectacular military success.
It's suspect that our commander-in-chief is the super genius behind this derailed train of an agenda. In fact, what if I told you that there was a unifying man behind all these crazy ideas? That a dark, shadowy mastermind is pulling the strings of our politicians, secretly injecting his dangerous and subversive program into the government to achieve ultimate influence over the most powerful country in the world. That would be fun. Unfortunately, it's this lame nerd. Chances are, unless you read profile pieces in the New York Times or the New Yorker, you've probably never heard of Cutis Yarvin. If you see a picture of him, you might say, that looks like my midlife crisis uncle. So why should you give a shit? The reason anyone talks about him today is that he's what you may call an ideas guy, or as it was known when he got popular in the 2000s, a blogger. Under the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug, Yarvin and his blog exploded in popularity among the Silicon Valley tech bros, even prominent ones like billionaire and alleged twink murderer Peter Thiel, and as an extension, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, who was bankrolled by Thiel.
He writes a bunch of blog posts that tell tech billionaires, you are the most special boys on earth and everyone should listen to you.
And thus, you get articles with the headlines, he's anti-democracy and pro-Trump, the obscure, dark Enlightenment blogger influencing the next U.S. administration. Cutis Yarvin says democracy is done. Now, I think the extent to which he is influential over the people in power is overstated. But for now, the Trump admin agenda and Project 2025 are emblematic of the ideas in his blog, so I guess we have to talk about them. But what's so special about his ideas that they attract the richest and most powerful people in the world? What groundbreaking yet devilish plans does Cutis Yarvin have? What innovative and sinister machinations are going to bring about the end time? Oh. Are we really doing this again? When we get into the nitty-gritty, you'll see that he's slightly different from other versions of libertarian brain rot, but this is basically it. His whole shtick is, some people are just better than others and know how to get things done, so we should put them in charge and cut away the fat, thus making the world a utopia of efficiency, just like Silicon Valley. You know, a place where companies have a 3,499 in 3,500 chance of failing. Before we get deeper into his twisted mind of nefarious and dangerous ideas, I think it's important to look at his childhood and do a little armchair psychology. Cutis Yarvin was a child prodigy, and by child prodigy, I mean he skipped a couple grades and became a high school sophomore at 12. For those of you who have never had the gifted child experience, imagine that 4th grade math is too easy for smart little you, and so you move on to big boy 5th and 6th grade math, and your parents and teachers all tell you that you're a very special boy who is better than all the other kids. So you get these delusions of grandeur about how much better you are, which makes you an annoying little Ben Shapiro type kid with stunted emotional and social development, placed into an environment of insecure high schoolers just looking for a snot-nosed little nerd to take out their puberty frustrations on. Additionally, Yarvin's parents were both federal employees, or as he says, members of the deep state.
I grew up inside what's called the deep state because my father was a foreign service officer and my mother worked at the DOE.
And Yarvin felt that he saw the failures and obstacles of a bureaucratic, inefficient government. So you can kind of see how this informed Yarvin's anti-establishment worldview. We have a man who was thrust ahead in baby school, but held back from social development, whose worldview is shaped by 4chan and other messaging boards, and the fact that certain rules didn't make sense, and thus feels like he was one of the true few who understands the world's problems. So what influential ideas could such a man have? Cutis's most notorious idea is that democracy and liberalism are weak and don't work.
It's not even that democracy is bad, it's just that it's very weak. The fact that it's very weak is basically easily seen by the fact that very unpopular policies like mass immigration persist despite strong majorities being against them.
Basically, he has the same politics as Mr. Beast, or me when I was 14. The government is so big and complicated that they can't make everyone happy. We just need a guy to come in and do all the good things, and none of the bad things. Except I grew up and learned that the government is complicated because the world is complicated, and most of these agencies were created to solve a problem. And do all the good policies means a lot of different things to the millions of people our government has to manage. And despite how badly things can go with our current system, it absolutely would not be made better for most people if one guy just forced everything through. And that's what Yarvin suggests, that America needs a king that makes all the decisions, specifically a Silicon Valley CEO.
I think that if you took any of the Fortune 500 CEOs, pick one at random and put him or her in charge of Washington, and I think you'd get something much, much better than what's there.
American democracy is a sham, beyond fixing, and having sort of a monarch-style leader, or call it a CEO, or call it a dictator, that's the way to go. America needs to get over our dictator phobia.
Now, if you're thinking, hey, wait a minute, that's not Curtis Yarvin, that's the New York Times interviewer summarizing his positions. And that's because Yarvin is a windbag who never gets to the point, which is why he needs to be asked the same question several times just to get an answer.
So why is democracy so bad? Why is democracy so bad?
He's nominally the secretary.
I feel like I'm asking you, what did you have for breakfast? And you're saying, well, at the dawn of man, when...
I'll speed this up.
And then answer the question, what's so bad about democracy?
If you think I'm doing him a disservice by not showing his full answers, you can go watch the interview yourself. But spoilers, he does not speed this up. At least Mr. Beast says he would consult the experts. Curtis thinks they're part of the problem, or as he calls them, the Cathedral. Actually, no, I'm not even going to humor this stupid idea with its own section. All you need to know is that it's basically his version of the deep state. A bunch of process-obsessed academics, experts, and institutions that all think the same, want to keep themselves in power, and slow down real progress. Just as a taste, this dipshit thinks that the reason scientists all came to the same conclusion about climate change is that taking climate action is a marketable idea that requires tons of money and resources, while doing nothing is a recessive and passive idea that people don't like, completely ignoring the incredibly marketable idea of climate change denialism that's made the fossil fuel industry billions by convincing morons that climate change was made up to force you to improve your health by walking more and eating less red meat. But no, Curtis, those self-serving underpaid scientists are doing it to keep their jobs. They're the real elites, not your billionaire tech friends who buy elections and take shits in sparkling water. The point is, Yarvin wants to restart, or to put it in tech bro terms, reboot the government, get rid of the Cathedral, and install one guy surrounded by a bunch of loyalists. We're getting a taste of Yarvin's playbook now, as Trump fires thousands of government employees and demands loyalty from those around him.
I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people, and when the courts, because you will get taken to court, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it.
And hold on, you say to Curtis Yarvin, haven't all the unrestricted monarchies of the past resulted in some sort of oppression or uprising or failure?
It would be an understatement to say that humanity's record with monarchs is mixed at best. Sort of your favorite monarch, Louis XIV, he's like starting wars like they're going out of business. Put Hitler aside and only look at Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot. We're looking at people responsible for the deaths of something like 75 to 100 million people.
Understanding why Hitler was so bad, why Stalin was so bad is really essential to the riddle of the 20th century.
Yeah, I think the bad part was the genocide. I guess he thinks the deeper answer is that they were driven to the Holocaust and mass killings, or what he calls excess, by external forces of democracy.
One of the arguments in Mr. Yarvin's book is that Hitler and Stalin gave absolute monarchs a bad name because they were driven to the excesses of the Holocaust and the gulags because of existential threats from the Anglo-American alliance.
Ignoring, of course, that guys like Hitler wrote a whole book with genocidal preludes, but darn those external forces for driving him to excess. Now, how his monarchy would be immune from these external forces, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure that his is that different, given what he said about the undesirable portions of the population. Whatever the exact solution, it is crucial to find a humane alternative to genocide, an outcome that achieves the same result as mass murder, the removal of undesirable elements from society, but without any of the moral stigma. Okay, so some sort of nice version of genocide. But if Hitler and Stalin give unilateral rulers a bad name, what's Curtis's ideal?
Who are the monarchs we should be looking at as the kinds of examples we should be emulating?
I think Elizabethan England was an absolutely wonderful place.
Okay, so your ideal government is one where the ruler says the Irish are rude and barbarous and facilitates their conquer, starving 30,000 Irish to death, among various other Englandy policies. One of his go-to examples of experts getting it wrong that a single guy in charge wouldn't is the idea that virologists identified SARS viruses as a potential future problem and thus funded research that made a more powerful disease that may have led to a leak and the 2020 pandemic.
If the research that had created COVID had gone before one of these little kings, let's say Louis XIV, and his virologists come and are like, well, we're going to collect all the bat viruses and engineer them to be more dangerous to see what would happen if a dangerous bat virus emerged. He would be like, why are you doing this? What do you hope to get out of predicting this? And he would get this just stream of babble and nonsense that meant nothing at all.
But no? Because what if instead you said, oh, great king, we have developed a safe way to make these viruses more powerful. And in doing so, we'll develop defenses for all future sickness faster, making you the most powerful king in the world. And because he's a dumb 17th century idiot, he'd be just as likely to trust his loyal disease advisors than to say, common sense says that's not a good idea. Or what if he decided to weaponize the disease against neighboring countries? Or any other insane thing? Maybe having one guy decide everything isn't a good idea. Basically, Yarvin gets to live in this fantasy world where everything in his hypothetical would go mostly right. All the failures of today's society get blamed on the current system, while none of the failures of anything resembling his ideal get attached to that.
When you basically take these communities of experts and put them in charge, you're basically giving power to them, and power corrupts them. And actually having basically power centralized and absolute in a way, there's sort of no way to corrupt Louis XIV because he has everything. You bribe him? What do you bribe Louis XIV with, right?
Meanwhile.
Hello, everyone. This is Donald Trump. Hopefully your favorite president of all time, better than Lincoln. I'm doing my first official Donald J. Trump NFT collection right here and right now.
He might as well be playing with action figures.
Oh, Kamala, I'm so efficient and better than you. I do everything so good. Donald, I hate how you are so anti-democracy, but at the same time, I'm infatuated. Oh, come here, you crazy communist.
The examples that Yarvin uses to illustrate the benefits of monarchy are pretty bad. His go-to is saying that a MacBook is made by a monarchy.
And then you're looking around yourself and you see, for example, a laptop. And that laptop was made by Apple, which is a monarchy. Whereas if your MacBook Pro was made by the California Department of Computing, you can only imagine it.
There's some truth to this. If the government tried to make a MacBook, it would take way longer and probably be uglier and less efficient, because it's being developed by older and safer technologies and approved through several dozen, if not hundreds of people, rather than a CEO and a couple higher-ups. But you and I can choose not to use Apple products. In fact, I purposefully don't use them, because they're overpriced and oversimplified and lock you into a proprietary ecosystem where you have to use the same phones and watches and babysitters, or else none of your stuff works together and you can't get your files if you don't have an Apple account. And God forbid you try to text your Apple friend an Android video, because it will scramble it to look like you're the problem. Why do you have green messages? Shut up. If you lived under tech monarch Steve Jobs, you can't just decide to switch to the Android monarch. And sure, he might get things done fast and unilaterally, but he also might be a total fucking moron that decides to try natural remedies and homeopathy to cure his cancer, or God forbid, everyone's cancer. Good luck, Grandma. Plus, the MacBook wasn't made by monarchies, because they'd be impossible without things that only the government and its funding and planning power could provide, because the government decided that researching it was for the common good, like the internet or just computers in general.
One of the wonderful things about Joe Biden and the Biden administration is that electing this man who is palpably senile and actually incapable of, can barely function, people are like, how is this guy at the beach in Delaware, all day and the government still functions? Could Apple function with Tim Cook being at the beach all day?
Yes. In fact, Apple seems to be doing just fine, with Tim spending a fair amount of time watching Ted Lasso on the Apple Vision Pro, exercising, hiking, rock climbing, cycling, and traveling to national parks. Almost like he doesn't have some insane power over whether or not things actually end up getting done.
Yeah, should Mark Zuckerberg run the fucking government? How many billions of dollars would he spend building a stupid metaverse that nobody wants?
Introducing, Dave, legs for all Americans.
And this really shows how Curtis's stupid tech monarch idea falls apart when you think about it for a few seconds. Much like talking with any libertarian ever, as you ask questions about their hypothetical ideal, very obvious problems begin to pop up, and they slowly have to reinvent the systems that we already have. What if your tech CEO is a stupid idiot and abuses his power because absolute power corrupts? Wouldn't you need some sort of separate body to hold him accountable?
The way to do it generally right is to have something I call an accountable monarchy. The way a CEO relates to the board, what a board is there for is a backup mechanism in case things are really not going right.
Oh, you'd have that. Well, who gets to pick this group of people? Well, obviously not the tech monarch, because then he'd just install loyalists who might go along with whatever stupid plan he has. And he couldn't possibly be an expert on everything, right? So he'd have to have some informed people below him to keep tabs on special fields like the military or drugs or the environment. Maybe he'd even have to defer to them for decisions, since he wouldn't always know the best thing to do. In fact, the experts might have to tell the monarch what the best problems to solve are and how to solve them. And he couldn't possibly just improv every single punishment and ruling off the top of his head, so it would probably make sense to codify some laws or even regulations to hold the people accountable. And what happens when the tech monarch makes a bunch of decisions that the people don't like? Something like fucking over a bunch of their employees, citizens, because they feel like they're not needed or dead weight. They'd probably want a way to make sure it didn't happen again. Maybe by making it so the people could choose the council who holds the monarch accountable. Or they could even choose the monarch themselves. And here's a question. Why did you delete that tweet where you responded to a photo of a hot girl and said, she has a bigger body count than a SpaceX rocket booster? What did that mean? If there's one silver lining about the Trump administration, it's that we get to see Curtis's vision enacted in real time through people like Trump, who most of the Republicans coalesce around like he's a king, or more specifically, Elon Musk.
So in that case, maybe Elon Musk is more the kind of exception than the rule.
I would say, both the exception and the ideal.
Here's what you wanted, buddy. A tech CEO that just knows better than those dumb government people. And he was able to cut a bunch of programs that were necessary and scramble to bring them back, destroy our soft power and condemn millions to suffer and die thanks to our lack of aid, consistently fail to meet his savings targets, call the president a pedophile and try to throw him under the bus when he proposes a bill that's exactly what he said he was going to do the entire time, and then consider making a third party that makes it so that liberals win forever, thanks to splitting the Republican vote. But just like Musk and every other historical example of such a power structure that Yarvin can point to, he can ignore the fact that such a flawed and oppressive government obviously fails when the people are unhappy and revolt, and just pretend like they didn't do it right that time. And he's already playing defense now. He's kind of like those far-left people who claim that true communism has never been tried. I guess if your playbook was a psyop to make Elon fuck everything up and then come crawling to you for advice, then it worked. Alright, so this guy has a lot of dumb ideas, but people in power think he's smart.
I've been following this guy for a while. He's extremely smart.
If you listen to him talk, you might be fooled into thinking he's smart. After all, if someone quotes a bunch of people that you've never heard of, clearly they know more than you.
Does anyone in the room recognize the name Robert Califf? Wow. Back room, we got one way in the back with the beanie.
The problem is, it's much faster to spread bullshit than it is to debunk it. And if you bother to take the time to look into his claims, he's either misquoting it or getting the point extremely wrong. But by the time you've debunked one, he's spouted off a dozen more, essentially giving you a bunch of homework to do before you can engage with his high-level ideas. Wow, he really is the kid that said, "Teacher, you forgot to give us homework." In fact, in this debate he has with Danielle Allen, a Harvard professor, he gets quite a few things wrong, wrong, including the name of the book he was supposed to read in preparation for the debate.
Reading her book, and I was reading, Democracy. Was Democracy is a Path to Justice?
Other way around, my friend.
Justice is a Path to Democracy.
Justice by means of democracy.
Justice by means of democracy.
When he talks about Aristotle's 6 forms of government, he says that there are actually 3.
When I take Aristotle's 3 forms of government, monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy,
Aristotle had 3 categories: rule by one, rule by few, and rule by many, each that have a good and bad form, one that puts the interests of the ruled at heart, and the other the interests of the ruler. And Yarvin says that both outcomes are neutral.
I think Aristotle kind of made a mistake by saying, okay, there's 6 forms, there's a good form and a bad form of each. I really like them as neutral qualities.
Completely ignoring what Aristotle said about the importance of laws.
I'll just make a very brief comment about Aristotle because I cannot let it go by having a hash made of Aristotle. The 6 forms matter a lot in Aristotle. The thing that Aristotle thinks will achieve rule for the sake of the ruler, or rather the ruled, the people who are being ruled, and get them good government is law, limits, and accountability.
He's done a bunch of reading. He's not well read, because if he actually interacted with people who wrote those things or do that work, what they'd say is, no, you fucking idiot. That's not what we meant at all.
At one point in the debate, he claims that people would scoff at the idea of letting elected officials interfere with Harvard.
I don't think anyone has ever suggested holding Harvard accountable to voters. In fact, I think most people at Harvard would be repulsed at the idea of letting elected politicians soiled by filthy democracy choose Harvard's admissions department.
And clearly he's knowledgeable about some of the history. He even knows the date it was founded, which 99.9% of people probably don't.
Obviously, Harvard, founded in 1636, is considerably older than the United States of America.
But turns out, oops, he doesn't know the actual history of Harvard.
Maybe just let's get some facts laid out. Massachusetts is in fact the actual founder of Harvard College. The state legislature directly did take responsibility for Harvard through the middle of the 19th century. So in that regard, one can't say that it has never been the case, that there has been very direct and clear civic connection for Harvard.
Okay, so he's not the best historian, but he was a software engineer, right? He started and was CEO of the company Urbit. His stated goal was to make a decentralized network where each user owns all of his data, a private virtual machine protected from surveillance, sort of like a libertarian, decentralized version of computing. It's not a terrible idea, but it does use this vomit-inducing programming language they created called Hoon, which makes it hard to deliver on its promise of security because what third party is going to be able to audit this system for potential flaws if they can't even read the language? It's like writing your app in that cat leet-speak language. CoinDesk called Urbit a slower version of AOL Instant Messenger, and a former employee said, "It doesn't work the way it's supposed to," describing Yarvin as the world's first computer science crank. But hey, it has like a couple thousand users. I guess when he talks about capable tech CEOs, he doesn't mean himself. This isn't nearly so important, but considering some of my other videos, it would be silly not to mention the fact that Cutis Yarvin is racist. When you know the vice president likes this guy's ideas, it's maybe worth pointing out that he said things like, the Great Replacement is one of the greatest crimes in history. Is it greater than the Holocaust? I don't know. We haven't seen it play out yet. Of course, he believes in race science and all that fun stuff. He said that whites have higher IQs than blacks for genetic reasons, that some races are more suited to slavery than others. Once said, although I am not a white nationalist, I'm not exactly allergic to the stuff.
This is the trouble with white nationalism. It is strategically barren. It offers no effective political program. To me, the trouble with white nationalism is that it's racist, not that it's strategically unsophisticated.
Well, he even supports Rhodesia, the second shortest, lamest, racist independent nation after the Confederacy, lionized amongst the far right online because it was a white minority apartheid state. He said the leader, Ian Smith, was the last great Englishman who fought for a system where a natural biological elite rules. Why are all the race IQ people always the lamest, ugliest failures who have nothing to show for their life's work and are obsessed with some natural birth birthright that those dirty immigrants are denying them. I could talk more, but I don't want to. This guy's annoying, and he sucks. But what do we do knowing that our government might be taking cues from the anti-democracy guy? Well, for one, stop making him out to be some boogeyman. He's a loser, libertarian-esque LARPer wearing a leather jacket. Don't platform him next to these tenured Harvard professors who actually know what the fuck they're talking about. And when he gains popularity, or is given a platform, make fun of his garbage ideas and poor historical understanding. This man deserves to be laughed out of the room. But the problem isn't his ideas. It's that people stupid enough to listen are also powerful enough to act upon them. We shouldn't exist in a world where our vice president can be thrust into power through Peter Thiel money, where a billionaire can spend hundreds of millions to influence an election, fuck up the government, and then get mad at the guy he helped elect for doing the thing that he was gonna do the entire time, you stupid fucking retard. For the love of God, tax these idiots into oblivion so they're just very, very rich instead of hubristically, dangerously rich. Clearly, they don't know what they're doing with their money because they're spending it on idiots and their shitty companies. That way, Curtis Yarvin remains a dumb guy with dumb ideas, and not a focal point for the destruction of our government. Plus, he doesn't really read criticism.
Like a lot of writers, I really don't like looking at responses to my own work.
So, other than stripping billionaires of their insane power, I'm not really sure how you can bully this guy if it's not in person. Unless, of course, his address is easily found on the internet, and he's never been in a fistfight.
But if you want to take over the state, that means that violence is not available to solve that problem. I happen to prefer that because I've never been in a fistfight. But
the following clip was filmed at great distance and with trees obscuring Curtis Yarvin's house so as not to reveal his true location.
Hey everybody, sorry about the audio quality here. I am on the road with Ro Khanna. If you're wondering how I got an interview with this big shot journalist or meetings with congressmen, it's thanks to my friends at Progressive Victory. They're an organization dedicated to making it easy for people like you to move the Democratic Party more left. They helped Democrats win the Senate in 2022 through door knocking and phone banking, and more recently did 23,000 phone bank calls for Zohran Mamdani in 7 days. In fact, every good thing about this video was because of them, but also any jokes that fell flat or factual errors. You guys are always asking me what you can do to help out. Well, they need volunteers who want to step up and fight back against all this bullshit. So go to progress.win/volunteer, or don't even bother typing 1, because you clearly don't want to end the deep state. And if you're really lazy, it's time for Oops, All Ladders. Today's smaller channel is Hadi Rahim. He made a great video essay on why trans people deserve rights. I was this close to sending them to Alcatraz. He also copied my thumbnail style, and imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So check out his channel in the description and give him some love and ones. As always, thank you to my patrons, but especially my top tier patrons: Ash, Moth, Anita Bonghit, Astra Cosmos, Big Mac 1906, Bo the Banana, Rat Tamer, Broke Gemini 907, Babowski, Church, Died Famous, Dr. Pepper Lover, Engulf, Foxy Guy, Just Stop, Marche Taylor, Morton Grew, Nipple Fisting, Omega Omelet, Take Mamoru, Shri Kumar, Joseph S, Mad, Evan A, By X3, Chris T, Toby the Robot, and Mr. Thoughtless. And don't forget to type 1 to end the deep state.